Intelligence unbound by flesh and blood,
but born of machines. AI.
A new sound of progress or a threat unseen.
Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 174 for the end of December 2022. So the end of the year, our last episode of the year. And without getting into any banter, I figured let's just get into it because we invited our fellow Unusual Collective member, our brother in light, Dave Szweduik, to join us for a talk. We came up with this idea today, I think, right? Or yesterday.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I didn't want to end the year by going like, well, let's figure out like summary of the year and blah, 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 because it was kind of not a good year. And I don't want to get into all that and, resolutions and stuff. I don't know, but something is popping up on the radar. And I think we've kind of skirted the issue. We've talked about it a little bit here and there, but I thought this might be a good time to start parsing it a little bit because we're going to be hearing a lot about it in 2023, I'm sure, and from now on. So discussion is AI and AI photography and AI illustration and AI in general. And I can't remember how we wanted to start this, but we got into sort of a heated, friendly, not heated discussion on our Unusual Collective board. And I thought it would be a good topic to talk about because I don't think we can avoid it anymore. And I think it's probably a good thing to start talking about for the beginning of the year. And stuff is starting to go weird,
Yeah, it's weird. All right.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you say?
This whole AI mess, we're obviously looking at it from a photography standpoint, but I'll tell you what, it's touching so many different areas of creatives. I mean, from video people, from digital artists to books and book cover artists, things like that. And it seems like it's just rapidly gaining momentum where it's spreading its tendrils, and it's kind of scary where it's going in some ways. I don't know. It's a weird beast. I don't know.
It is a weird beast, and in full disclosure, I want to add my hat to it. I've actually subscribed to one of the AI systems, the Midjourney AI. So I don't know if we need to talk about it a little bit. Like maybe, I don't know if anybody.
That's what I'd like to do. And,
go ahead.
Part of the reason why, we'll start there from our first exposure to it. For you and I, it was the Midjourney AI, which is a natural language prompt that you can call from a Discord client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we discovered, like all interesting technologies, is it is addictive.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, how do you get the initial interest in it?
Word of mouth, I think.
Word of mouth, and then once you get in there, you kind of can't stop. You have an idea of what you want in mind, and after 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, what do you want to call massaging of the prompt that you're sending the engine, you get this kind of amazing thing that's like a visual realization of something you just made up, or a merger of a whole bunch of different influences into one picture.
So maybe for the people who don't know exactly what's going on, the way this works is Discord is, if anybody knows Slack, or if you don't know, Discord is sort of a clone of Slack, and it's the way we communicate our Unusual Collective. We have our group on there, so it's sort of like an internet on internet. But Midjourney AI is accessible through Discord, so you join or you subscribe to it, and what you do is you then go on there and you enter prompts, and you describe an image that you want. So for instance, I was doing, and I think I talked about this before in one of the earlier episodes, but I was doing wet plate versions of Dune, right? Of sort of a reimagining of Dune. And so I would enter, wet plate photograph of, warriors on Dune, blah, 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 blah. And I'd write all this stuff there. And the AI would take this and parse it and sort of generate an image based on the prompt that I put in there. And people are been doing this with all sorts of ideas and images, and this has been going on. I mean, for certainly the past year. Mm-hmm. I think Midjourney's been around. There's a few other versions of AI image making software. The other one I know is called Stable Diffusion, and another one is called DALL-E, DALL-E. And it's basically the same kind of thing. People put prompts in there, and then the sort of AI engine generates an image based on the prompts. And what Ward was saying is that you massage the prompts. If the image doesn't come out the way you want, you have to sort of rewrite it in a certain way and get the prompt to the AI to sort of produce the kind of image you want. And it's can be very strange. The imagery can be very strange and very compelling. And yeah, Ward, like the reason why I ended up joining because I was so addicted to it.
Yeah,
constantly making especially with this Dune stuff. I was prompting this Dune stuff, and I was like, well, I might as well start paying for it. And yeah, so anyway, I wanted to sort of describe that for anybody who didn't know that. And for the Midjourney, you do have to pay for a certain amount of prompts, and I can't remember what the price is, but anyway, sorry, I wanted to go into that.
That's fine. I just think we need to acknowledge that if we're going to be dealing with this, as a subject. I mean, once you start using it and discovering how addictive it is and the material you can create from it, that's one reason why it's so easy to go from a thought that you have to producing a product. And we'll get into the discussion about art and all that kind of stuff, art and information. But that was just a thought I wanted to finish, was that it is a very compelling technology.
And it's not going anywhere.
No, it's here.
I think what prompted this discussion tonight was, what was it? Was it a petapixel article?
Yeah, I believe it was a petapixel article.
About the people who were running Midjourney, or at least one of the people there admitting that they are scraping the internet of images in order for its AI to create it. So, we've been on the internet for how many zillions of years. Mm-hmm. We've all been putting pictures up there, and they're all available to be seen by whoever, us, computers, other people, whatever. And the AI is taking advantage of that by looking at all these images and essentially, I don't know, borrowing bits and pieces would be the best way. What do you think, Dave? How would you say that?
And I guess I don't even know exactly how it's working, because on one hand, I wonder, are they just having their machines look at this stuff and then learn something and then spit out its own version? Or is it literally, like you said, scraping little bits and pieces and this and that, and, via something equivalent of the Photoshop argument? I mean, that's not the argument I want to make on this thing, but, something like that, where it's kind of using a conglomeration and putting them all together. It seems to me it's more reference material, but I'm not smart enough to know that stuff.
Yeah, neither am I. I can't for the life of me figure this out.
Yeah.
But I've seen images produced. Oh, well, to go back to the petapixel articles, that they're basically admitting that they're scraping images, which means they are using copyrighted images, mm-hmm. probably images that are not copyrighted, whatever is available on the internet, mm-hmm.
that
can be seen. It means images and illustrations, whatever can be put up there. Mm-hmm. These computers are, sourcing, let's just say sourcing for the lack of a better phrase, material to then create a conglomerate and put your picture out. So if I say something like, I want a tintype picture of, a Dune soldier, it's going to look at, older style pictures and sort of borrow from, tintypes that it sees, and then, grab bits and pieces of people that look like they should belong in the desert or something like that. And again, I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind the curtain. That's probably part of the problem, I think, with this thing. But they are admitting that they're grabbing copyrighted images because,
And they have this excuse that they can't. They can't differentiate. Like they're saying that there's no way for them to differentiate between a copyrighted image and ones that aren't. Kind of struggling with that because a lot of these images, do they not have EXIF data or anything that the file comes in?
That's all going to depend, right? I mean, when you upload pictures, do you always upload all the EXIF data? Are all your pictures copyrighted when you put it up? Is that information always part of the pictures? When you upload to Facebook or when you upload to Instagram.
Yeah, now Facebook, they strip a lot of that.
They strip a lot
out.
of it, right? Yeah. And I'm assuming these computers are taking images from everywhere, so they have to be taking copyrighted pictures because I may copyright my pictures, but even if I don't have the EXIF data there, it's up there as an image that might be copyrighted. And
right.
So, yeah, but
I guess what I was arguing was they made a choice not. It sounds like they made a choice not to do analysis of pictures coming in. I guess that's what I meant. Yeah,
they take the stance. I think it's easier to just let her rip and not worry about it because otherwise they'll spend an eternity trying to track down every single photo. Because I don't even know that their machine, that there's any one department that could look at this and say, okay, here's where we're looking. We're pulling images from this source today, for example. Now we need to get a hold of all these photographers' images, see if we can track it on. I think it just basically, they're turning it loose, and let's just say Instagram, for example, saying, okay, someone put a prompt in for this, boom, take a swipe of images, see what it can come up with based on the keywords put in. And I don't know. It seems to me it's not an excuse to not seek that out or to just use it, in my opinion. But it is an enormous task of, I don't know how you could possibly hope to track down if they're literally scraping millions and billions of images, at a time. So
yeah, we're going to just scratch the surface on this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because you start thinking about it, like in terms of like that, how many billions of images are available on the internet for these things to scour through. And how can one even possibly, unless it's a very obvious ripoff of your photograph, how can you actually tell, like, this little, 2% of this AI generated image is part of my image? There's no way you can tell that. So I don't even know where this is going to go and how this is going to end up. I mean, the farthest I can see, like, would, this is jumping ahead, but like, would this have to be regulated by the government? How is that going to happen? And what a headache that's going to be. I mean, I don't even understand how that's going to work out that way. But
I just looked because I don't mean to interrupt you. I just looked because I was curious. Now this is coming from a site called photutorial.com. I know nothing about them. Where they get their stats, I'm not sure. But according to them, in 2022, there was 54,400 photos taken every second, 196 million per hour, 4.7 billion per day, and per month, 143 billion a month, 1.72 trillion a year. Those are all getting fed somewhere. How could anybody possibly hope to keep track of any of that?
Right. And
I don't know.
The other practical part about this is how many of those pictures are from people who don't really care.
Yeah.
Like what's going to happen to their pictures. I mean, the
three
of us
community
might care. Yeah. But we're a small percentage, not even a rounding error on some of those numbers in terms of people who care, which made that Petapixel article, or at least that, I was reading in it, someone saying class action suit, I was like, sure, fine, go ahead, try. I mean, I don't see that, sorry to be cynical about this, but I don't see that doing anything other than just maybe making a few people happy.
Let alone being able to prove that one of these AI-generated images actually infringed upon and used your particular work.
Right.
Good luck.
It's not going to happen unless it's obvious. I mean,
Right.
there might be an obvious, copy that you can see. And
Well-
I noticed some images that have come up on the feed sometimes. Even actually one that I've generated where it's got a little bit of a watermark from like Getty or something like that that's been distorted,
Oh.
but you can kind of tell.
Interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's happened to me, and it's happened to. I've seen other people posting that and saying it's obvious, and the discussions can get pretty heated about that.
Sure. Well, where it also comes in though with the copyright side is how often are people plugging in that I want, and this article touches on that a little bit, I think, or maybe it was in another one I was reading. I want an Ansel Adams style photograph of this subject matter, or a Walker Evans style or XYZ photographer. When you start doing that, that they're pulling directly from that photographer to get the feel of, whatever style that is, because a computer doesn't know who Ansel Adams is. It's got to go find that and research it and then try and do its technological magic to simulate that look somehow. So those cases I could see there being a pretty clear cut, legal challenge, like, hey, this thing's been spitting out images, in Antonio's style that people have been plugging in his name specifically to get that style photo. Well, there's only one way they're going to learn that style photo. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know that, and I think that's possible. I would probably argue that they would going to have a hard time with that. Again, because I'm not a copyright, master. It's like I'm not, but I know enough about it that you can derive work from other people.
Sure.
There's the fair use, of images. We know lots of artists who've done that. How many people have absconded with even like Disney pictures or Disney imagery? What's his name? I want to say, was it Jeff Koons, who, the sculptor artist who's very controversial in the 80s and 90s, producing. He produced pretty interesting imagery, but I know I'm pretty sure he absconded with some or used the imagery from Disney. I think there's some Japanese artists who also do that. And yes, they're skirting these issues, but it's how is the image being used? You know? And so you're right, Dave. I think if someone says in the style of, but if I start saying like in my blog post I say I started taking pictures in the style of Walker Evans, and it's scouring pictures and it looks at the words and it uses that. It might actually grab some of my pictures, and then we were saying online like if I decide I want to walk, we've talked about this before, Ward. I'm going to walk in Walker Evans' shoes and do things in his style.
You're doing it as an homage to Evans.
Exactly. So where's the line there?
It's a fine line, I think, and I think the only argument you could make, and I don't know, I have no answers in this whole mess, but it seems to me a lot of times these images that are coming out of these AI generation tools, when you put in, you want a, say, Walker Evans style versus when you go out to shoot in, with his mindset or, a subject matter that you feel resonates, that's still you personally shooting, you personally creating, and it's not going to look the same no matter how hard you try. Whereas these AI tools, when you tell it, I want this, this, and this, some of that stuff you've been sharing like in the Discord, if you didn't know better, you wouldn't know. It is spot on note for note at times, and it's kind of scary in that sense. I don't know. Then you get into the world of adding that into the deepfake technology and everything else that comes with it, and start to wonder, like, are humans needed anymore? What sci-fi world are we in right now?
You were talking earlier at the beginning about it's not just photographers, but it's like especially for illustrators and
that was a point you made in an earlier podcast too about you think of illustrators for books and movies, so, those production illustrations. I think of Doug Chiang's Star Wars art, how hard is it now for AI to do in the style of Doug Chiang?
Even if it's not in the style of somebody, I've been seeing. I follow. I'm on a couple of AI boards on Facebook because it's really interesting to see the images. I mean, to be on the other side of it, to be receiving and viewing the images, it's almost. How do I say this? It's almost too much. It's too much. My brain. I feel like my brain and my eye is going to explode. Because people are coming up with such crazy ideas and feeding them these prompts, and the imagery that comes out is indescribable in some way. Like someone just posted, someone did a prompt instead of Darth Vader, it was Barf Vader.
Oh boy!
And it was from Spaceballs.
No. That was like Darth Helmet. That's Dark
John
Helmet.
Candy. Okay.
Oh, Spaceballs. No,
I'm thinking of Barf, the John Candy character from Spaceballs.
No, this is Barf Vader, and it was images of Darth Vader, immaculate. I mean, like with the shine and the helmet, with the like different versions of like the bottom part of it, and he's throwing up. And I made me laugh, of course, because why not? And I would have never thought of that, and that's what it's interesting.
It sounds like a fan art idea too, right? I mean, you could see a bedroom poster of Barf Vader for some teenager,
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. People are starting to use this to generate money from them.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get into talking about that or not, but the viewing of it is so compelling, especially the photography or the quote unquote photography. I can't even quite call it photography. People are calling it photography, and there's nothing photographic about it. It's borrowing and scraping images and piecing them together. They look like photographs. Some of them look incredible. Actually, there's one I want to talk about.
Photorealistic,
but to view these images, especially the illustrations, I think there's a lot more illustration that people are doing, and to think about like being an illustrator and what it would be like to be sitting there watching this happen. And there's this part of me that sort of says, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but this is kind of how I felt a little way back when, like, for instance, I'm doing stock photography and the stock photography industry started going downhill, right? And people were starting to give their pictures away and their subscriptions. And I'm sitting there and people are saying, this is the world, deal with it. And I'm like, this is messed up. I mean, this is like, people are selling their where I used to sell pictures, for what seemed to be a decent amount of money. Now people are just like buying for pennies. And now, people give their photographs away. We talked about Unsplash many times. And AI doesn't, gets involved in this too in terms of photography. But for illustrators now, they're watching, and some of them are getting involved in the AI business because they can prompt and they can get their images or make imagery through that way. But I'm imagining for people who are, make their money doing science fiction book covers. There was, I just read an article about a science fiction book cover that was what?
I've got you. It's Tor Books.
Yeah, the Tor Books thing. Yeah, talk
author
about it.
Christopher Paolini, he was known originally for the Eldest and Aragon series back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And now he's got his first book out was called To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. His second book in that series is called Fractal Noise. It's the sequel. They used a stock agency, according to Tor. Their artists used a stock agency, purchased rights to an image, and created this book cover. And supposedly they were unaware it was an AI-generated image, which Tor, if I'm understanding this right, had at various points in the past come out against the use of AI. They believed in paying their creators, they said, and everything else. And then when push came to shove, they said, well, when it came to light and we found out this was, the case, and this part of this book cover, or most of it actually, is an AI-generated image, due to time constraints, we're just going to go with it. And the author signed off on that as well and kind of used that as an excuse to say, well, because of, timing and everything else, we just don't have time to redo this. On the flip side of that author is big enough in that world, and Tor is definitely big enough. They could have hired their graphic designers to crank out a cover by hand in probably a matter of a week or two. So it's not a huge delay, but they went ahead to do it, and they're facing major backlash right now in the book community because of that. So yeah, it's bleeding into everything.
Well, the crack is open, and the dam is bursting, because that is not, once someone says okay, they're going to do this, other people are going to look and say, well, those guys did it, and so why can't we do it? That is not, that genie is not going back in that bottle.
No.
I mean, that is that sounds very familiar to I don't know, when I was talking about my photography career, or like when that part of it was starting to, that little crack opens up, and that's it. And I really feel for the people who this is going to affect. And yes, people are saying, well, this is the new thing. You got to deal with it, blah, blah, blah. But this is something different.
Yeah. Well, we've seen it with journalism too, right? I mean, these large publications, they don't want to pay their photographers. They don't want to pay their staff writers, so they let these people go, or they pay them peanuts, and they rely on citizen journalism. Can't talk here. Citizen journalism. People submitting cell phone videos and photos to cover stories and events rather than the professionals. People giving random eyewitness accounts instead of a professional writer writing up these news stories and doing what they're going to do. And it's kind of the same thing. They start, and I hate to sound cynical, like old man yelling at a cloud, but they start with the kind of menial tasks, the small jobs that are just, this is just some, copy edits or something like that, and we can use this for that. And they start with those jobs, and suddenly it just sweeps over everything. And then we find ourselves in a point where, well, wait a minute, there's no more photojournalism. There's no more digital artists. There's, what XYZ thing. That's where it gets real scary for me, is because I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's not going anywhere. You can't stop it. So what does that mean for, I mean, I don't make a living from my photography or my art, but many do. And if I wanted to, even, what does that mean for people that are wanting to do this, when now it's just, no one's going to pay someone to do it and pay for their experience when they can just have a computer do it for them. So,
yeah. Another thing that popped up on a timeline for me was actually one of the Facebook timelines. I'll read what it says by a photographer. I won't say their name, but actually what I saw first was the picture. Because with Facebook, you don't have to read the whole thing, but it was a photograph. It's a photograph of a woman in a sort of a low cut blouse photograph. The background is very out of focus. It actually kind of looks like a Helios kind of background, a little swirl going on.
Yeah, it's a
blonde,
curly, swirly bokeh there.
Yeah. Anyway, I cannot tell that this is not a photograph. Maybe if I zoom in a little bit and stuff like that, but it's an AI generated image, and the person who made it or generated it said, "Realism is just a fact within AI generative tools. I created this portrait with SD, stable diffusion, straight out of the prompt, no post-production, no retouching, pure wording. I'm a professional cinematographer and photographer, and let me tell you, I truly believe 2023 might be the last year most of my cameras are actually used." Now, that sounds a bit like hyperbole, but Dave, based on what you're saying, I'm looking at this. I mean, we see this picture. I can't get it to focus on it. I won't post it on the notes, because again, it's copyright. I don't know yet, so I'm just you're gonna have to imagine this. But I'm looking at this picture and I'm thinking, like, okay, if there are art designers anymore, art directors, say, I need a picture of a young woman, in a nice, elegant dress, standing in front of leaves. Boom, done. No models. No production, no photographer, no editing, no anything. It's just someone sitting there generating the picture, and I don't know what it scraped to get this picture. I mean, we don't know the behind the scenes. We have no idea.
Looks
But
like
I'm looking at the
looks like
Huh?
the Maston Labs website sample photos. I'm kidding. It looks like the type of photo you'd see on their website for their presets, but
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an amazing image. And of course, this is nothing new. I mean, when you look back, like I said, I've been following these things around. There's a lot of amazing images. One of the problems, these AI things have is the hands. It's one thing it can't really do a good job of, which is kind of funny because it's
Well, I was thinking about that actually, hands and eyes.
hands and eyes.
I think that's on purpose.
Why do you think that?
I think they were hedging their bets that they made something intentionally wrong with the image so that you could differentiate it from a photograph.
a little bit of the.
That's my tinfoil hat. I think they're for some reason they did that because I don't think it's a hard problem to solve, and I think they left that in there. Now I'm thinking of like a few months ago when I paid for it just for a couple of months, the Midjourney one. And there was something, it seemed intentional to me. Lots of the images that I saw, the teeth were not right. One eye was a little bit in its wrong orbit, and the number of fingers was too many or too few. I think that's intentional. You can, come after me if you want, but I think that was intentional.
Well, I don't know. You look at this picture, you don't see her hands in it. It's just sort of a waist up shot. Her eyes look pretty damn good.
Yeah, including the catch lights. I blew it up on my screen, and it looks real. I mean, it's
yeah. I mean, if you took this picture and brought it back in time to somebody in the in the 80s, let's just say, and you said, "Here's this picture," they wouldn't look at it and say, "What?" Wouldn't even like, "There's something wrong," uncanny valley kind of thing. No, they'd be like, "Okay, great. Let me use it in a magazine." I don't think you can do, but it's interesting word about what you say. I don't know. Maybe that could be Midjourney's way of doing it. But I've seen pictures or imagery coming out of Stable Diffusion, which just blow my mind. I mean, to me actually right now, I think Stable Diffusion is the one that looks like the most photographic. At least the photographs that come out of it. I mean, the illustrations. We'll table those because there's illustrators are so imaginative and they come up with such strange things, and so you can't tell an AI artist in some way from someone who's really good at this, I think. But the photography, I think, is a little easier because, like you were saying, the hands and eyes.
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, looking at this photo some more, the only thing, and I know listeners, this is compelling audio for you because we're not sharing this, but there is one thing on this image. If you look along the left side of her face, down towards where her earring would be, along the left, the left side of the image. There's a weird, it almost looks like a dog ear, like black hanging down. The shadows handled a little weird.
Right here where the hair is separated from her.
Everything meets. And I think that's just something that artist, whoever did that, they give that to their art director and they say, yeah, that looks good. Now clean it up. And then they just go put in a couple more prompts and sprinkle their magic dust. And
well, actually, that's what happened with the tour cover. Because if you look at the tour cover compared to the cover compared to the AI art that I got they actually had to adjust the legs of the astronaut or something like that. So yeah, someone did some cloning and stuff like that. But that takes, you could do that on your phone with the image, like no longer do you need someone to retouch. Oh, that's a whole nother story. We won't get into that. But it's quite amazing. And I'm subscribed to the Midjourney thing because I like generating the images. Again, it's sort of it's like a rabbit hole of.
And it is a creative thing too, right?
It is a creative thing. It is. And okay, I'm going to put my, my soapbox part of it. The people who are using this and calling themselves artists, I have a big problem with because what I experience doing this is as if I'm giving somebody like I need an image of such and such, like for whatever reason. And that artist goes and produces the image and gives it back to me. And I'm like, okay, well, could you adjust this a little bit? I am not creating the art. I have nothing to do with any creation other than putting words into a system And there are people out there who are calling themselves artists based on this, and I have a little bit of a problem with that. And I don't I'm open to having my mind changed, but at this moment, I think the person who's doing the prompts have really nothing to do with the art creation. They are the ones who are sort of pushing along the creation, but the machine itself is creating the art. And so, I say I create pictures with it. I prompted the thing to make imagery, and I love doing it. It's fun. These Dune, the ones I did with Dune, and this is an earlier version of the Mid-Journey stuff. So that it was really kind of rough and edgy, which I actually kind of liked, because it didn't, like what you were saying more before. It's like there's no way to, you can tell that it's been generated from a computer. But or I'll do I'll do spaceships because I love science fiction spaceships, and so I'll just do that so they can look at them. It's like I have no. I will. Well, okay, I'll fess up. So I'm okay. This is here we go. I'm starting to write a blog on Tumblr about my experiences being a widower. I guess I found that writing right now is helping me a lot to deal with the death of my wife. And I decided that I was going to use the Mid-Journey, right? The Mid-Journey AI to create an image that would be the header for my blog post. Because I wanted an image that, described it. And it was what for me was interesting was prompting Mid-Journey AI. It was one of the things my first post was about, for me, floating on water, like how this feels about the death of my wife, and feel like I'm on an ocean. And I was really just trying to come up with something, and I generated dozens and dozens of images until I came up with one that I thought kind of fit. And because I'm paying for it, I could grab the image, and I'm using it as a blog, so it's a personal thing, and I didn't really have a problem with it, but I am using it. And so I've used it a couple times for these headers on my blog. The one was really hard to do. I was trying to get a picture of a woman putting her hand on a man's shoulder, and she was behind but not visible, because the story was like my wife she doesn't have my back anymore, and I wanted someone that illustration, and I couldn't get it to do it. I had I finally after 4 dozen tries, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna come up with something. But anyway, I used it, and so. Here I am on one side saying, it's like there's an issue with this, and here on the other side, I've consumed it, I've used it, and I've done something with it. So that's sort of a true confession here, and I don't know where that puts me in this world here. So anyway, I thought I'd mention that.
It speaks to how difficult, if we're going to solve problems like try to put food in artists' mouths. This is a complicating factor because, again, the technology is compelling. Where do we go? Do we treat the output from these engines as do we treat them as art, or do we treat them as information? Legally, I think we would have an easier time as artists to treat the information that comes out as perhaps as information, and then there would be a little bit stronger as opposed to art, which can be derivative and so on. We say, you used my information to create this product without my consent. We have a problem.
All right, so we obviously we're not going to get through all this, but what do you think is going to be okay? So this photographer said 2023 is going to see the end of his cameras. Like I said, I think that's a little overkill, but I'm going to ask you guys to sort of project a little bit because this is happening in real time right now. So each one of you two guys, start with you, Dave. I just want you to think about what do you think is going to happen. And not predict, but like, what do you see going on? And maybe encompassing all of it.
Yeah.
Because we've got photography, we've got illustration, we have writing, and I know you're very interested in the writing part as well.
Yeah.
So dive into that a little bit.
I've got two just kind of initial thoughts that have been kind of gnawing away in my head. And we talked in the Discord about this a little bit. I've been kind of putting together the thoughts for some sort of essay or whatever. But the one thought is, based on what Ward just finished up with there a minute ago, I wonder if one direction to take this, because we know it's not going away, is to basically set it up and instead of having all of this AI crawling the web at large, you have artists who are going to submit their work to their image bank, for lack of a better term, or their whatever they use for their writing stuff, or all of that stuff, and they're going to get paid some sort of probably minimal compensation for contributing to the larger pool. The more people that are doing that, the larger pool has to draw off of, and the more these things can get refined. And that way, those that are not wanting to do it, they don't have to do it. Have almost an opt-in system. It seems to me that might be a extremely optimistic and hopeful approach to how this will work, because frankly, there's nothing that's going to stop them from doing what they're doing right now. The second thought I had about it was kind of wondering when we're going to reach a point with all of this where you're going to see photographers like the three of us or anyone else out there listening. You're going to see people who are maybe writers trying to write their first short stories and submit them to magazines or whatever else it might be. You're going to see, quite frankly, probably magazines in themselves completely vanish from the online space, because that will be about the only way to make sure that your work is not being just used without your compensation. And I can't help but wonder, it sounds cynical, but honestly, I'm kind of hopeful for it, because even though there's such a great reach potential online with social media, I almost wonder if we're going to see artists, the people that really want to create their own art and not have it added to the AI, start to just form their own small offline communities, and art's going to in some ways take a step back where it was, where you'd see it in galleries, you'd see it in public shows or small group settings, whatever it might be. But at least it's being valued for what it is at that point. And then the people who are sharing stuff online are basically giving their consent, and I wonder, that's what I wonder most about as far as the direction of all of this.
That's interesting you said that. I don't know if you heard, I'm also I'm part of Shutterstock, and I got an email from them.
Oh.
And the email title says Shutterstock partners with OpenAI.
Oh, boy.
Let me read it for a sec, because it's interesting. Working together to lead the way with AI. We're excited to announce that we're partnering with OpenAI to bring the tools and experience to the Shutterstock marketplace that will enable our customers to instantly generate and download images based on the keywords they enter. Let me skip that. In this spirit, we will not accept content generated by AI to be directly uploaded and sold by contributors in our marketplace, because its authorship cannot be attributed to an individual person consistent with the original copyright ownership required to license rights. Blah, blah, blah. See, but later on it says, in the spirit of compensating our contributor community, we are excited to announce an additional form of earnings for our contributors. Given the collective nature of generative content, we developed a revenue share compensation model where contributors whose content was involved in training the model will receive a share of the earnings from datasets and downloads of all AI-generated content produced on our platform. Blah, blah, blah. It goes on. Anyway, but I just remembered that as you were talking about.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if as a contributor you can choose to have your stuff
Right.
In there or not. It might be part of their contract to say, well, if you're going to partner with OpenAI, they're going to grab it, but we're going to compensate you no matter what. So it's interesting.
So Shutterstock is saying they will not allow the uploading of AI generated images, but that Tor article, Tor purchased I don't know from where. I'm curious. Now that you read that, I'm curious what stock agency they used to purchase the image that they thought was artist generated and not AI, only to find out that they had purchased the rights to an AI generated image. So someone's obviously allowing that.
Someone is, yeah. And also, as having been on the side of the, I've done the photography part, reviewing it. It's possible that a reviewer who's looking at the image might not know it's an AI picture, because they may not be versed on the style of that. So it might have gotten through the system without it being understood that it was an AI image. Possible, I don't know, but there's probably a lot of places that are, going to be selling or who are open to selling AI stuff, or it could have been like a place like Alamy. Alamy.com is, at least from what I remember being part of, is that the agency doesn't. It's like you're marketing your stuff yourself. So anyway, there's a lot of open doors for that. So interesting. Ward, what do you think?
Well, just what Dave was saying, what you were saying with the Shutterstock letter. Initially, when we were having this discussion, I was thinking and I think I used the term in the Discord chat, and that was what reminds me of another compelling technology that was Napster. But that was different because that was the actual product that was easy to differentiate. The labels could go in and grab them back and create their own mechanisms to share and monetize the content. In this case, that's all fractional. The Shutterstock letter is certainly, makes me feel good from the artist side because it does a couple of things. It helps ease the minds of the people who are already in Shutterstock, and it might very well also be a driver to have to attract more customers, to attract more artists and photographers. It's like, oh, look, they're doing this kind of revenue sharing model. Let's go there. In terms of the effects, and I think your original question, Antonio, was about the effects of things. I see production designers, I see interior decorators, I see home decor, I see a whole bunch of different kind of generic art sources being completely revolutionized, disrupted, destroyed, whatever, by this technology, where you can have individuals say, oh, I want to have this, this bitchin' T-shirt that's got like a blueprint of the city on it with a monster with wings and claws and whatever, and I want you to, and then they'll be able to take this thing and then make a T-shirt out of it. And I was thinking about that aspect, and there is this, this D word, the democratization of creation of local art or personal art that you can do. So there's that. In terms of illustrators, like you say, and you need to bang off some kind of art quickly to do some kind of commercial stuff, that's absolutely going to be disrupted. But I also see this once the natural language, and the natural language processing is actually really good, right, Antonio? It doesn't take you very long at all to get sort of what you want, irrespective of that one example that you shared, which would have been hard to describe, possibly. I think all of that will get better. But I do see this democratization going on. I do see some industries being disruptive or wiped out. Your Shutterstock letter has really just now kind of changed my point of view on this. I think if these AI creators could they could use their own instead of charging you directly the $10 for whatever 300 seconds of CPU time, they could push that back towards or charge or do whatever they need to do in order to get everyone involved, part of the revenue sharing. I think there's some hope there. But I think, I basically said what I was going to say on that. There's good and bad. Like every new technology, there's kind of winners and losers. And I think it's exciting. Like you said, it's compelling. I think there's some interesting stuff that's going to happen.
Dave, talk to me about the writing part a little, though. I wanted to make sure I didn't. Oh, sorry, I didn't cut you off, Ward.
No, I ran out of words.
Yeah, sorry. But I wanted to talk about the writing part too, since that's a lot of what you're involved with as well.
Yeah.
And the writing one is, and I know we're a photography podcast, but we want to incorporate all this stuff because it's all under the same umbrella. Writing, I think, is a little bit trickier in the sense of like, photography might be easier to, figure out, okay, in the style of this or scrape images from that. But I think writing, it's words, and so I don't know. What throw something in about that.
I've seen this popping up a lot in a few other Discords, that I'm in, with readers and writers and things like that. And they are starting to pop up where they are generating entire novels generated by AI. And if you think about it, in my opinion at least, I think what you're going to get is a lot of stuff that would feel very commercially mainstream but not very deep. We see that with writers right now. Not that they're using AI, but there's a lot of books, a lot of writers that they're not interested in making the next great American novel, that's going to be some deep meaning. They want something that's going to catch eyeballs and capture imaginations with as much surface level, simple stuff as they can, and it sells like hotcakes off the shelves. That kind of stuff, I think AI can step in and probably do if you feed it enough examples of, hey, this is what's selling right now. This is what's big in the world of, mainstream TikTok-driven fantasy books, for example. When you look there, you see the same 15, 20 books constantly. Everyone's reading the same thing. And even now, even though they're not AI, oftentimes they all feel the same when you try and read them. And I think that kind of stuff, AI could absolutely step in and do that. Not that it's a good thing. I have no desire whatsoever to drop my hard-earned money on something that a person didn't actually take the time to write. And I think that's where it comes down to for me mostly is just art is valuable. The creative process is valuable, both from a personal level in the act of creating it, but also as a consumer of it, as an enjoyer of it. I think there's an element when you know that someone else's hands or eyes or fingers or brain went into making this thing, physically putting themselves into it versus just a few command prompts and something getting spit out. There's a tech side of me that's extremely kind of curious and excited about all this, the nerd in me. But there's the artist, the creative side of me that absolutely is terrified of all this because it feels like, I don't think art is ever going to die, but we've seen how many dystopian future style, sci-fi novels or whatever it might be, movies, films, whatever, where basically art and individuality has been wiped out of the world. As simple, and I'll throw this up into Canada land for Ward. Look at the theme of Rush's 2112 album. That whole theme of that is he finds a guitar in a cave, and society they don't want it. They don't want someone to individually learn to play music. They want just what they're going to do, we've seen these themes forever, and now it's terrifying because it feels like we might be on the brink of that. Now as far as writing, I don't think you're going to get AI to generate novels that are, or stories that are going to impact people on a deep level like some do. Whatever genre you're in, if you're a fantasy fan, a sci-fi, the classics from Hemingway or Steinbeck or whoever it is, I don't think, at least at this point, AI is going to be able to step in and say, here's a version of, Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and it's going to have just as much power. I just don't see it happening.
It's already happening, though, with journalism. We got AI generating short stories for magazine websites or something like that. Especially
blurbs, condensations.
Financial websites are using that. And so, I agree it's not going to happen next year, but the year after. And maybe not, we have to also, Skynet is not going to destroy us with missiles. It's going to replace us with...
Yeah, right. Yep.
We're going to get replaced with with writers and illustrators and artists. We're just going to
The Great Gatsby written in the style of Stephen King.
Oh, yeah. I'm down.
Yeah. Well, so far, all of the stuff is referring back to things, right? You know, you see photography in the style of Saul Leiter's, stories generated in the style of, whoever. And what's going to happen when, or if it's going to happen where AI comes up, and I sort of put this under, again, one big umbrella, but it comes up with its own thing. Like this, Hemingway was his own person, but maybe AI will become its own thing. And people will like it for what it is. Not that it's copying something from the past, but like, oh, it's done this thing. It's generated this this artwork, this photograph, this image that is of itself. I mean, that it comes from, like, we appreciate it because it's AI. And then I wonder if things then settle down. So like, we have AI generated art, we have AI generated stories, and we still have writers and photographers and illustrators who do things like, photographer can go to the Grand Canyon and photograph an interpretation of the Grand Canyon. Can AI do that? No, but it can come up with its own thing. But the two are going to be distinctly different, one would hope.
Well, I think, and maybe this is just me spending too much time in books and movies, but that's the one thing that has always been portrayed when you look at AI in any sci-fi elements and futuristic speculation, is that usually it's when it gets to that level of having a sentient mind of its own, that's when things go haywire. And in the one thing that always trips up AI in everything you've ever read or seen, as far as I can think of, is that AI has zero emotion. It is cold, calculating, and logical in what it does. And that's where my hope, at least, is that when it comes to art and the creative processes, that holds true. This becomes another Star Trek prediction that maybe holds true, because at that point, AI can do all it wants, but when it starts learning to feel and actually have its own emotional and creative control over that side of it, that's when we kind of lose the game, I think. Interesting, though, I was thinking, you mentioned everything being AI, these machines looking back in the style of, etc. What I was curious about is what happens when there's now so much of this AI-generated art out there that it starts referencing its own AI-generated art to create more art. What happens when it becomes overloaded and there's no...
Well, there's a sort of an example of how these AI models that play Go, right? They come up with, and we don't know how, but they found ways to win the game in techniques that are mystifying the players. And there's the high level players of Go are saying there's something happened here. There was this beautiful pattern that the machine came up with, and we don't know how. I don't know whether it can be consistently like chess now, or if it's sort of in the running right now. So that's sort of a harbinger of maybe what's to come. There's a kind of machine-born creativity, if you want to call it there.
Well,
as to the sentience part, I think that's quite a ways off still.
I hope.
But in terms of the artwork that comes out of the machines, there's going to be a point where you're going to make a decision, and it'll be based on money. What direction am I going to go for commercial stuff? I'm not talking about galleries and known photographers and that sort of thing. But
as far as that goes, I think the AI is just going to be another, let's talk about artwork in general. AI is just going to be another person, quote unquote, that we have to compete with as an artist. It's just, how is an AI artist any different than, Joe Schmo or Sally Field here, It's just another thing. Like, okay, someone's going to like my picture, or they're going to like this picture. And it's just another person as far as that goes. Commercial is going to be very, very interesting because it's all about money. Yeah. And it's about, saving time. And this is the disruption I think we're going to be seeing. I think we're going to see disruption in 2023 commercially very quickly with stuff. And that's an issue, I think, especially for illustrators and photographers. Probably. I don't know. It's going to be, that's, again, Shutterstock
Well-
is making some sort of stand, but no one's to say that there's not going to be another agency that opens up that says, well, we're going to be just focusing on AI. We're going to produce our own AI models, and you can join and you can add pictures and you can get part of this. And I'm sure that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen next year, but this kind of stuff.
I like that model. I got to say, I'm really heartened by that example.
Yeah. What, that an agency that does that and creates that? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So, photography wise, the thought occurred to me, there are a couple areas of photography I think that will not ever be replaced by AI. It's your family photographers, your wedding photographers, your people like that, where who's going to want fake generated images of their wedding instead of their own memories? You know what I mean?
True. And
Yeah.
and everybody knows about this, but
Yeah.
what is the app now? Lensa?
Okay.
What everybody's making
Yeah.
AI, it's making AI generated illustrations of
Sure.
pictures that you drop into it.
Yep.
Okay. So, yes, I agree. And what was it? And or but on this one? I'm not sure. So of course I downloaded
Sure.
it and I dropped my pictures into it and see what kind of pictures it came up with. It was really interesting. And I dropped my wife's pictures into it just to see what it
Right.
would come up with. And it more or less did pretty good. There were some pictures that just didn't look like her, but there were some
Right.
that did look like her. And they were illustration-y, not photographic. They were illustration-y. But they put her in different kind of conceptual, and there was one that I ended up posting up on her. I ended up posting on a memorial board. I can't remember, but I shared it, and a lot of people enjoyed it because it was a different interpretation of my wife, and I looked at it too, and I was like, I got something out of it. I was I don't know. I was moved by it, and I looked at it, and she looked very sexy in some way, but it was not a way that I had seen her before. Anyway, it did something, and of course, it's not an illustration, not a photograph, but I'm wondering, like it will be the next step. Like this Lensa thing is taken off. Everybody's making a zillion different, avatars of themselves and I'm really curious what's generating so much interest in that.
Yeah.
My example aside, but
It's a buzzy trend.
It is, but what's the next step? Like,
Well,
if photographs can do that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what's this? It's one step away from illustration and puts you in sort of a fantasy thing. Like puts your face on a medieval knight and it presents you in a certain way that you never thought before.
Right.
I don't know.
but that's also not. It's also not giving you something that you'll look back on as this was the memory of that day. I mean,
True.
unless society goes all in and we end up literally like the humans in Wall-E, where we're just
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, we're just blobs floating around doing nothing, and we generate these fake personas. Ready Player One is another good example, though. You've seen the film and read the book?
Yeah.
You'd rather live in that alternate reality.
Yeah, in the Oasis, because the world is so bad that they'd rather live in their avatars. And I guess there's that dark view of things, but to try and keep myself feeling hopeful a little bit is I'm hoping that certain things like that, photos of my kids, I want the photos of my kids growing up when I'm older. I don't want some, I could go right now and say, hey, here's the pictures of them, a few I took and generate some memories for me, because that's not memories. So I think there are there's areas that I think are going to be okay. Unless you're like a wedding dress maker who, instead of licensing, images or hiring a model to pose in your dress, maybe you just have that dress mocked up in an AI image and say, hey, your day could be beautiful like this to sell it. I think commercial.
Right. Well, you would in that case, I can imagine a bride saying, here are a few pictures of me.
Yeah.
Generate shots of me in different dresses in different Wow, what would that be?
Yeah, and as cynical as it sounds, I think though the human race is egotistical enough where that bride will want to see. That will be a fantastic application of being able to see what she'd look like in that dress. However, she, in her own vanity and ego, will say, damn, I look good in this dress. I want to show the world. And so that's where the real photos will come into it. They're going to want the real thing to prove that it's them and not some AI version of them. I think humans that were pretty vain.
I hope you're right. I have a feeling that's
I don't know.
That's gonna be debatable. I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention was that all the stuff about the AI photographs, photography, stuff like that, has gotten me to very much look at pictures a lot closer now, in the sense of like, I don't know if this is real or is this fake, or like I start to look at a picture with a little bit more skepticism now. And I'm a little worried about that too, because, we take, we'll go back to photography now, but we take photographs to be true in some way. When Photoshop came out, everybody's now, have to think about stuff. And now, photojournalists have, restrictions about, how they can do things and whatnot. But with this AI generating like, alternate historical pictures. Like the again, it's a petapixel story, but the one that someone generated pictures of what looked like old cameras made of porcelain. Did you see that?
Oh
story?
Yeah, I kind of like those pictures. Yeah,
they were, but people were like, people who were, I don't want to say not smart, but don't know photography. Like, well,
Ming
of course,
Dynasty photography.
Those were not.
Yeah.
They were beautiful images. I have to say that it was, and conceptually, I was like, wow, could you imagine, like making a camera out of like porcelain and those designs? Like if you were going to mock something up. But the fact that people were thinking that was something that was real, or that it existed, and then unlike us, but people who are engaged in this artwork in photography in this field who understand things, there's so many the rest of the world, people who don't do this, don't necessarily question this stuff or don't really understand it. Or maybe they don't know the history of the Ming Dynasty or don't know the history of photography. When did cameras get invented? And so they start thinking that this is now the reality. And there are alternate history images being created of like World War II or of like, pre-Civil War. People don't know the cameras didn't exist before the Civil War.
Right.
And that's the part that I'm, in this, my speculation of images and thinking pictures are not real. I think there's going to be an equal amount, if not more, people who believe these things.
Yeah.
Who think that this stuff is going to be real and that people are going to be taking advantages of them. There's going to be endless stories of that coming up, of people setting themselves up with, celebrities on trips someplace and they took pictures. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that and this questioning of stuff. And like, will people just give up questioning? They'll just look at an image and say,
or asking the wrong questions. I think of take a picture of the Battle of Pearl Harbor with John Travolta standing on the dock. And you say, well, no, this is true. And they say, well, no, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. They didn't have Photoshop in 1941.
Well, we'll be spending all this time.
That's the wrong question.
Right.
That's the wrong conclusion.
I know. I just worried. I think that people will be spending more time defending. Like, if I create a picture now, well, I have to spend time defending that it's not created by artificial intelligence. Will people believe what they see? Will, so that whole monkey wrench in the gears thing, fly in the ointment, whatever metaphor I can come up with, I think that's going to be a very, very big issue coming up.
Well,
and,
let me drop this on you before we wrap up out of here. As you guys were just talking now, a thought occurs to me, something I touched on earlier regarding will the rise of AI with images and things like this kind of force creatives offline. And then a thought just occurred to me, will this be where film photography makes a massive comeback because photographers will no longer want to argue whether it's real or not. They'll have that physical thing. You guys talked, I thought of this when you were talking about the Ming Dynasty cameras, and I thought, well, now that's interesting. The physical in your hand, original negatives, whatever it is, versus the digital life, and my mind just jumped to that just a minute ago, so it's not a really fully formed thought yet, but I wonder if that's what we'll see as more of a return to the tangible, physical arts, photography, painting, sketchbooks, whatever, instead of the digital.
That revolution's already happening. I think the film photography is growing much faster than I thought. I think it's great. I think of our friend Shane. You know, he is a staunch defender, passionate about his process. And I see, the more I read, the more I see these people springing up all over, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
Let the hipsters, whatever you want to call it, we were complaining about how twin lens reflexes got expensive because of all the hipsters taking the cameras. I'm like, fine, let get the creative thing going, let them go. I think it's a good thing. Imagine having labs and darkrooms start up again. I mean, I think that would be cool.
I just wonder. I mean, we see it in. I have a lot of friends that are makers in woodworking and metalworking, stuff like that. These small handcrafted items like this, be it furniture or pens or whatever else, they're starting to become more and more popular. People want something handmade by somebody else they can talk to. And I wonder if we'll see the arts with AI starting to become more and more prevalent. Maybe in 3 years from now, everything's flooded with it. You'll see people the people that are sharing everything everywhere online, they don't care. They just, whatever, no big deal. But those that are really passionate about it, maybe it'll drive them to, maybe it's not necessarily film, but some sort of, like you were saying, Ward, bringing the craft, the physicalness, the labs, the darkrooms, whatever it might be back. I don't know.
You might be right, because what I was saying before was that when I look at these images, the flood of it's too much. It's like too much imagination is too. It's just too much. It was exciting at first. It's like, wow, look what we can generate. Look what we can see, and all these new things. And then at a certain point, I was like, I've seen enough already. It's like, okay, it's the perfect image. It's the perfect this. It's the perfect that. It's the most imaginative spaceship. It's the most imaginative planet. Darth Vader. I mean, at some point, it becomes oversaturated and
stale.
Yeah, and I'm wondering when that's going to just sort of, that will just take a dive. And this back to the tangible. That's a very interesting thing. I think we'll have to. I think we'll keep an eye out on that for 2023 to see what's happening. I did notice that there's new film stocks coming out from some of these other companies. There was a new Ilford film that's being that seems to be popping up my feed, and I don't see that often. Of course, film is hard to come by these days. Everybody like film. When I was working at B&H, film was the hardest thing to get in stock, and so you guys might be right that that's a hopeful thing. So I think we just need to pay attention to this. But I wanted to, and I know we're probably at time, but I wanted to get this out because it's sort of the elephant in the room, and we've skirted the subject a few times, and I think we want to come back to it because it's going to affect everybody. I think in some way, and in ways that we can't even predict. So we're just talking about the photography, illustration, writing part of it now, and it'll be interesting to see what else AI has to offer us or take away from us. So anyway, I want to wrap it up. Thanks, you guys, for hanging out with me tonight. Dave, where can we find you these days?
Easiest place to find everything is at solo.to/story for you. That'll give you links to the podcast, to my newsletter, to social media stuff, to everything you want there. It's all right there. Just kind of the simplest, easiest place to go to find everything.
Great. And thanks. Ward, where can we get you?
You can find me on Vero and Twitter at WRosinPhoto. Find me on Instagram at Ward Rosin Fine Art. On Facebook, I'm Ward Rosin Photography, and I have this little business, Ornis Photo, at ornis.photo, ORNIS.photo. That's where I sell the 7 Artisans lenses and lens adapters, which is our unofficial sponsor.
I'm not going to lie. I've been waiting because you guys teased it that you need to do it. I want this voiceover ad. I want to hear it start showing up at the end. Today's episode brought to you by Ornish Photo. Whatever it is. I got to hear it.
If we're going to do a New Year's resolution, we'll do that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. And me, you can find anywhere as AM Rosario on Vero and Twitter and Flickr and Facebook. I'm Rosario Photo. And that's about it. So anyway, thanks. You guys have a great new year. I appreciate you joining. Yeah, appreciate you
as well.
And everybody else, we'll see you sometime in January. We actually did a whole year of shows. We had a couple of reruns just because of the events, but we actually managed to do a whole year of shows, which I'm very proud of. So, cool. Thanks. So anyway, we'll see everybody in 2023. Have a great, safe New Year's, and you guys, Dave and Ward, have a great night. Thanks for joining.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.